Hey, Ches.
Hey James, how you doing?
I'm good. Happy New Year.
You do.
How's it going over there? You're in Cincinnati, I think, isn't it?
I am. Yep. It's going
Cool.
well. We just got a nice big snowstorm, so I'm pretty happy about that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. We've had some rainstorms recently. Nearly lost my car,
Oh,
but
really?
luckily it didn't get too bad. Well, I managed to turn around in time, basically.
Well,
Mm. Right, let's get on with it. We've only got 40 minutes, so I'll do a quick intro. Chez Chesak. Very pleased to have him on the show today. Travel writer, and I hope I'm not aging you unduly here, Chez, but a 20-year veteran, or must be coming up to 20 years or so in the travel industry.
yeah,
I think you were a
yeah.
15-year veteran when we last spoke, which was about 5 years ago, I kind of guessed. So, and the executive director of the Outdoor Writers Association of America and the recently appointed president of the Society of American Travel Writers. So
Correct.
those very grand sounding titles. My first question was actually going to be, do you actually have any time for travel writing these days? But then I saw you post into the group just today a piece you did for Fodor's about Chile in your, what I guess is your hometown of Cincinnati. So it seemed like you do have time still to write every now and again, which is good to see.
I squeeze it in as I'm able.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate though in that these three things that I do, they all really dovetail in so many ways though. There's so many times where a PR person might be pitching me on a destination and then I pitch them on joining SATW or OWA or something. So it all kind of comes together. It's
Hmm.
sometimes maybe a little messy, but it works
Nice little kind of yeah, ecosystem you've got all feeding around
all
itself.
together.
Yeah,
Yeah,
nice.
exactly.
But I also recall you saying that actually this is in the travel writing school group as well, that kind of pitching is one of the things you're kind of disillusioned with at the moment. It's like it feels like the real good stuff kind of gets neglected and the publishing industry is after certain things, the slightly more shallow, one-dimensional kind of pieces. Is that still something that you're coming across then when you try and get work?
Yeah, I've really been tempted to go over to the blogger side for many years. I've just never been able to pull the trigger on that yet. But I really just want more editorial control of these stories. I mean, I'll go have a fantastic experience at a destination, and then I start pitching it and pitching it. I mean, I just landed a story for Santa Barbara that I've been pitching for what, 2 years? And it'll be a nice story, but sometimes the outlets just want one sliver of the story. They just want to hear about a new hotel opening, for example, or something like that. Whereas I want to really immerse the reader in what's really the best experience to have in that place. So yeah, that's where my frustration is a little bit right now. Plus, frankly, with everything I've got on my plate, it's just pitching is just one more thing I'm not always able to get to effectively.
Yeah, and it's like, if you're only scoring, well, I'm not saying that you're only doing one story every 2 years, but if it takes that long to sell an idea, that's you're leaving money on the ground basically, aren't you? And we've got to pay the bills these days, even as travel writers and that sort of thing. So, but anyway, listen. So I know that the one of the big things that's happened for you recently is this presidency of the Association of American Travel Writers. So perhaps just start by telling us what does that involve? What is your kind of role there and being involved in, we're going to get into kind of the networking and associations that you've been involved with for many years in a bit. But tell us, what do you do now as a president of a writing association?
Yeah, I'm fortunate that I have this background in nonprofit and association management. So stepping into the role of president, I was able to really try to provide really four key areas that I want to focus on. One was to increase funding from outdoor sources, or excuse me, external sources, so that ultimately we can alleviate the burden of any kind of additional dues or anything on our storytelling members to bring in more sponsors and things like that. Two was just to really get the organization kind of further ahead of itself. It's very much volunteer driven, which is great, but sometimes that means that contracts for conventions and things like that are signed a little too late. So, kind of back of house, so to speak, trying to get the house in order and again ahead of itself so that we can better plan. Three was certainly to increase the work that we have on the DEAI front, really making sure that it's as welcoming as a community as possibly can be for any travel storyteller, whatever they cover, whoever they may be. And then the fourth one is really just really trying to ensure that it's as supportive an environment as possible for any member, so that any member can feel free to ask questions, to reach out to people, to just really connect with people, be they a mentor, a colleague, whomever that might be, and just feel very comfortable in that environment.
And so this is kind of about networking, I guess, as a travel writer, maybe considering joining something like one of these associations that you run. Like what's in it for them? Is it kind of this networking thing? You're meeting people in the same boat as you. You mentioned PR and publicists there as well. You get to meet some of them maybe that might want to pitch you ideas for you to then pitch to editors and that sort of thing. Is it kind of a big, collaborative effort like that where people can kind of meet people along the same, doing the same kind of stuff?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, in general, any of these associations, they focus on their members who are the storytellers themselves. And for them, it's all about, providing benefits that allow for craft improvement, professional development, and things like that. And once you have that base, it's naturally attractive to brands, to destinations, to attractions to want to be a part of that too. So in general, you'll also have this additional element that does include all the tourism boards and everyone else that are there to meet all those media. So first of all, you've got an opportunity for professional development, craft improvement, as I noted, or you should if your association's doing its job. But then certainly, and you have networking within that group as well. Other like-minded travel writers, for example. Maybe you've got a particular niche or a particular media that you use. Hopefully finding people who can guide you in that path as you grow and develop and expand your audiences, your skill sets, etc. But then, yeah, you have access to all those other destinations, again, attractions, people who really want to pitch you, get you on their press trips and things like that. So it's really, again, it's your example of an ecosystem where it's really kind of a ball where everyone's kind of feeding off each other in the most positive possible way.
Mm. And I mean, it must be quite nice for writers to actually be pitched rather than them constantly pitching editors and trying to sell them stuff. But now you've got publicists trying to sell you on what they've got to sell, I guess, and that sort of thing, which might be a kind of a novel experience for some people, I guess. Although I guess we all get press releases through the email if we're on those mailing lists and that sort of thing. Um,
We're all
but
getting pitched all the time with an association. Hopefully, you've developed hopefully you're there face to face at some point at a convention or a meeting or something, and you develop a much more natural, deeper rapport with someone as opposed to just doing things online.
do you get any publishers or publications or editors into your groups? I mean, I know that they're a notoriously hard nut to crack, and when I was running PitchWiz, I think maybe 5% of the signups were actual editors, commissioning editors, and 95% were writers looking for work. So there's something about the editing crowd that just seems very kind of shut off from these kinds of experiences that I've found anyway. What's been your experience there? Have you even tried to get them into that kind of symbiotic relationship?
Yeah, actually, both associations really go through great lengths to make sure that editors are included on some level. Both of them have an editors panel at their conferences and conventions. And, we get right down to brass tacks. It is just, how do you like to be pitched? What do you want to be pitched on? What do you not want to be pitched on? What do you pay? Like, let's just get right to it.
Mm.
Because ultimately, that should be a symbiotic relationship where, of course, the freelancer is getting to meet a great new editor, but the editor is getting exposure to pre-qualified pre-approved basically freelancers from a professional association. So ultimately, they should come together in a very nice way. And I mean, I can cite numerous times at an SATW event long ago. I met the travel editor for LA Times and eventually sold her two pieces, for example. And we're always trying to kind of foment that kind of connectivity as much as possible.
Mm. Okay, so you've mentioned events there now a couple of times. Is that quite a big thing that you guys do? Are they fairly regular throughout the year? How many do you run, for example?
Yeah, OWAA still has kind of a more traditional model where they have one conference a year. That's all well and good, but there's so much benefit, there's so much energy, there's so much good stuff that comes out of bringing all those people together. I'm really trying to expand that and hopefully to have smaller, say more regional events as well. And that's one of the good things that SATW does is they have a big annual convention, which this year was in Istanbul or last year was in Istanbul. But then they also have regional events as well with their Canadian chapter, with their chapter for the central states of the US. They also have events specific to different types of writers, be they freelance, digital publisher, the Editors Council. So they've got numerous other kind of specialty events as well. And whereas, we can get so much done digitally, of course, these days, I say for me, when you connect with somebody face to face and you can sit down with them and maybe you're having a shared experience on a pre-tour or something like that, having on a hike, sharing a beer, you just connect on a much deeper level.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, and I think this is going to lead into my next question about kind of the intimidating aspects of networking, or it sometimes can feel to be like an intimidating effort to go out when you're, particularly writers, tend to be a fairly introverted crowd. I find you prefer to sit at home
Yes.
and just phone somebody or Zoom them, or you feel like maybe that's a bit out of your comfort zone. But the rewards can be significant, can't they? And just for building those relationships. I mean, I know that you've been involved in these associations for many years, and so networking has obviously been a big part of what you've been doing for a long time now. So what's the advice there? I mean, maybe give us some tips on how you started along this road, basically, into travel writing and networking and being and kind of climbing that career rung in the actual associations. But then also, I know you said yourself in the chapter you wrote for our collaborative book that you're yourself not a outgoing kind of hugely ebullient kind of guy. So how have you got over those own kind of personal challenges, and what advice do you have for others that might find that sort of thing a bit off?
The challenge is real. To be a first timer, to join an association, and then to sign up for their annual event, and to put yourself out there and to go there and just walk into a room full of people, that can be a little challenging, particularly for us naturally introverted writer types. But do it and stick with it. It will pay off. I guarantee it. And now, um, it can be a little challenging too because a lot of these associations, sometimes their members have been there for 10, 15, 20 years. They don't mean to be cliquey in a mean way, but they can't help but gravitate to their friends. And so breaking into that little bubble can be pretty tough. Both of our associations, though, go out of our way to really introduce first timers. OWA has a special badge. Actually, both our associations have a special badge. We have introductory events. We allow them to get to meet each other and things like that. The secret sauce really is if you're going to an association event for the first time and they have a pre-tour, go on that pre-tour because then you're having a shared experience for 3 or 4 or 5 days, and now you roll into conference with 10 brand new best friends, and then they of course know other people, and they then will introduce you too. So it's definitely worth it. It can be tough at first, it can be daunting, but stick with it. Utilize all those resources, all the pre-event digital networking things that you can get into and stuff like that. Get on that pre-tour for sure, and just really put yourself out there and step through that door to start to make those connections happen.
And I think you touch on a point there, which I think is an important one, which is understand that the rewards from doing this sort of thing can multiply. You mentioned this in your chapter in the book as well, which is when you meet one person at an event, you're not just meeting one person really. You're opening a door to a whole plethora of potential opportunities later on. And do you have some, has that happened to you kind of thing when you've been at events like this and in your career?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. I mean, once you know one person well, they might quickly be like, oh, wait, you're a special, like I focus primarily on outdoor and adventure travel. They might be like, oh, wait, you've got to meet so and so from this destination over here. They're really making a push on the outdoors right now. Or here's an editor, I know they're covering a lot of outdoors these days. It just naturally happens. I think there's so many people within associations who are naturally collaborative, and that's why they're there that they can't help themselves. I'm certainly like that. If someone were like, I focus on eclipse tourism, I'll be like, oh, I know some guys who run some amazing eclipse tours. Let me put you in touch, that kind of thing. And that often naturally happens just at all those all those in-person events in particular.
It's fascinating to hear you talk about kind of eclipse tourism, which is obviously kind of a niche topic that I'd never even heard of before. Actually, I must know that there are kind of eclipse tours going on, but this kind of gets into the idea of niching down even within the travel industry. And like you said yourself, you're an outdoors and adventure travel guy.
Hmm.
I spoke to Lottie, who's a dog-friendly travel writer in the group a couple of weeks ago, and she was quite big on niching down, saying that this can really kind of it feels like you're limiting your opportunities, but actually you're making yourself a point of interest. You're kind of giving yourself a kind of an expertise that other people might not have, and you can broaden out from that basically. So how did you get into outdoors and adventure, and what have you found about kind of niching down as opposed to being a travel wide generalist?
Yeah, I really just followed my own passion, and just always been an outdoors guy. Been in the outdoor industry for a few decades now. So as I really started to realize, first I was in adventure travel and I was going to all these great places, and I've always loved to write, and I was just like, why am I not telling these stories?
Mhm.
That's what also brought me into the travel writing fold. So for me, it was just a passion for that particular aspect. And yeah, don't think of it as sort of like niching down as so much as just being focused. Focus on your passions. Now, I will throw out a caveat. If I can sell a story about a museum opening or family travel or a bourbon review, I'll sell those too. But, I always just keep my primary focus being what it is, which is just my own passion. And yeah, it's been fun to meet other people in the travel industry who are like really just only on rugby tourism. I mentioned eclipse tourism because two of my South African buddies who now live in the States, they work with a couple other guys and they run eclipse tours all around the world every year.
Mhm.
And there are all sorts of like fabulous niches, focal areas for someone to focus on. If you love culinary, if you love military history, make that your thing and just own it.
Mm. Yeah, and you said you haven't gotten into the blogging as yet. So you don't have your own kind of travel blog going on the side, or anything like that. Everything you
Not
write,
yet.
you're trying to sell to a publication somewhere. Right.
Yeah, it's just it's definitely something I very much want to do. Just haven't been able to make the adjustment. It's probably because I know too many good bloggers who have told me, how hard it is to do it right in terms of SEO and keywords and all those things. So I've been probably kind of like backing away from it instead of just jumping in there and doing it, which is I think what I need to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm now running this kind of travel blogging. I'm calling it a master class. I'm in no way an expert because I don't have my own travel blog either, but I'm doing it with a bunch of guys and a bunch of people in the group. So we're trying to just start. But it's not, it
Mm,
can be not intimidating, but it can feel a bit complicated compared to the very linear pitch and write and sell and pitch and write and sell kind of journalistic route. Travel blogging has all sorts of other things to consider, but I think the point, and it's not it's not going to suddenly rapidly take off overnight. But I think if you start today, within 2 years, you'll have written 50 maybe pieces of content or 100, depending on how productive you are. And you'll have something reasonably worthwhile then. And, it's just a slow build. That's how I see travel blogging. I think it's not rapid and
agreed.
not
Yeah.
hugely lucrative, certainly at the start, but it can be. I've spoken to travel bloggers that are earning hundreds of thousands of dollars a year through various business exploits. So it's an interesting one. But yeah, outdoors is a big thing for me as well. I live in a very rural part of southern England, so I think that's what my blog might be on. So if you want to do a guest post from the wilds of Cincinnati, I'll hit you
I'll
up.
I'll be your North American correspondent, and
There
you
you
can be my
go. There you
European
go.
correspondent.
Sorted. But so let's talk about kind of then these, going to events and networking again, which is your big thing. There are considerations there, time and money being
Mm.
two of the big ones, I guess. Um, Now you said in the past that you consider these as investments in your career. What kind of time does it take to do this sort of stuff, would you estimate? And how much money does it cost to go to one of these big conventions or something?
It really varies. There are so many associations out there. There are sometimes, if someone's just getting started out, they might want to focus, say, on something regional. It's much more accessible. It's hopefully something you can drive to as opposed to having to fly. They generally will come in at a lower price point than, say, at SATW, just as an example, when you go to sign up for their convention, you might get a little sticker shock, but it actually includes the hotel. Whereas like OWA, you would register with us, but then your hotel is separate. So these are things you just need to like really look at. I would suggest certainly starting to look at it as I also look at press trips in terms of like, I'll write out in a spreadsheet and have tabs for each trip. Okay, what's my time commitment? Okay, what are they covering? What are they not covering? What's my expectation in terms of what I'm going to get out of this in terms of how many stories and how much money I'll be able to make back off that investment? You should be able to do the same thing with associations and their events too, often which are set up also like quasi press trips. They have a core, 3 or 4 days of networking and professional development sessions and all that stuff, but often with pre and post tours on both ends. I mean, SATW even has like day tours built into the core days, with a dine around one night. So there's multiple story opportunities that you can get out of an event like that too. So just really look at it sort of holistically, both in terms of your total investment of both time and funds, but then what you really realistically think you can get out of it as well.
Mhm. And do you think people should attend, like let's say you sign up to SATW, you go to an event, should your expectation be that I will sell a travel article off the back of that commitment? Or is it more of a kind of more of a long game you're playing there, establishing some relationships first and then just hoping to kind of make a few or discover a few opportunities that you wouldn't have otherwise?
I mean, ideally it's both.
Mm.
Because again, most travel writer conferences, conventions have some kind of pre and post tour element. So hopefully we'll be able to get a story right out of that, if not multiple.
Hmm.
But then, yeah, the event itself is really a longer term investment, in terms of what inspiration you might get out of it, what actionable intelligence you might be able to take home with you, all the connections you're going to meet there as well. Again, both associations I'm involved with, they have editors panels, so you'll be able to meet those editors. There's all the other freelancers and other folks that you're going to start to network there as well. And that's where you're looking to really build a community. And one thing with an association, assuming that you like it for your first year or so, really look at it, and do your research beforehand, but look at it as a multi-year commitment because you generally don't get a lot out of the first time you go to any event, be it a trade show, an association, conference, what have you. You really got to, again, do all that prep work, network hard, as much as you can, follow up, and then be prepared to do it again the next year because that's where you generally really start to see things really take off. Is that second time when you're going the next time around.
Where people recognize you, you recognize them, and you start to really,
I remember from last year. We had a great time on our pre-tour. Hey,
yeah,
you're
yeah,
back. Awesome. Welcome. Let's grab a drink. That sort of thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned kind of doing research there as well. Now, there are lots of kind of writer associations in North America, I assume. I haven't done my own research on this. But I do remember you writing in your chapter about watching, just being careful with some that you join and, maybe looking out for some red flags that show that maybe an association isn't going to be as rewarding as it could be. So maybe just go into that a little bit, what you think makes for a good association and signs that maybe an association is not, you're not going to get as much out of it as you could.
Yeah. First things first, the website. If it looks dated, if it's a hot mess, if you're seeing a lot of typos and things like that, you can start to question it right off the bat. Like, how professional is this association? They can't even keep up their own website. Um, and every website has a few little dings and things like that that need to be updated. But if you're starting to see a lot, that's where you can really start to wonder about what's going on there. And certainly ask around, whatever writer friends you have, ask them if they have experience with that particular event, that particular association. And you might hear good things or you might hear bad. Take it with a grain of salt. Some people might have gone in and just gone at a terrible time and it just didn't work out for them. That doesn't mean because it was bad for them, it's not going to be good for you. But yeah, do whatever research you can. And like everything else, like we were talking about earlier too, about staying focused on your own particular area of expertise or your own particular area of passion. Don't spread your resources too thin. Don't get excited and join like four or five of them. Pick one, maybe two at the most, and really do a deep dive into the ones that you ultimately come around to say, okay, these are the two I want to invest in for a year or two or longer, and really go in there. But yeah, first do that research, do whatever research you can, just to figure out what's going on there. There are a few. Most of them are nonprofit organizations, charitable organizations on some level, professional associations, etc. There are a few that are privately owned, at least in North America, and I think you have to watch out for those the most because they are privately held. They don't have a board to watch over them and to make sure that they're staying on the right path or not just doing something quirky or strange or off mission. So try to find out if they are a true nonprofit or not. And if they are not, if they are privately held, owned by someone who's trying to make money off of it, maybe give them a little bit more research just to make sure that they're going to fulfill what you need to get out of it.
That's a good point. Um, you also mentioned something as well about how if you can track the membership numbers over years and they appear to be on the down, that's probably a sign that maybe they're not putting as much effort into their membership as they could and that sort of thing. So that's another piece of kind of another data point you could try and research and look out for. Um,
Absolutely. A lot of associations out there are struggling because they aren't really evolving. They're still doing what they did 10, 20, 30 years ago.
mm,
So yeah, if you can see their membership numbers, be it in the US, we have a form for nonprofit organizations called the 990. And you can kind of see like their annual revenue and things like that on those. If they have an annual report, they should have their membership numbers. And if you can track over several years and start to see that they have been decreasing, that's something to take into consideration. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to be good for you, or it might be a situation like once upon a time, OWAA was just a much larger organization, but that was like 20 years ago. Over the past say 5 or 6 years, our membership's been on an uptick. But if you're to look back 20 years ago, you'd be like, wow, these guys used to be like, I don't know, 1,200 members. Now they're 630.
right.
Um, so you know, do your research, but really try to look at the big picture of the entire organization. Even though there might be some flags out there, it still might be beneficial to you, at least for a year or two, to dive into that community and get to know who the members are, who the players are, and who ultimately your next business connection and maybe even friends will be.
Mhm. And mentorship is something else you've kind of written about a little bit, I think. Have you been a mentor to writers yourself? I can't remember.
Um,
I might have this wrong, but I'm just trying to recall something from your chapter.
Yeah, a bit. SATW has done a really good job of really creating a mentorship program.
Oh.
Actually, they've done a good job. A lot of associations have a mentorship program, and it's sort of as a mentee, you might sign up, and then a mentor has to be the right person, and then they'll link you individually. We do that at OWAA. That works very, very well when it works, but sometimes it's just we have a number of mentees and not enough mentors, or vice versa. And SATW started doing something that I like, and it's called an ambassador program. And it's kind of like a mentor for the association itself. Instead of being a mentor for your career, it's just like I'll pick up the phone, or they'll say, hey, this is a new member, he's been assigned to you, great. I'll set up a time with that person, we'll have a chat, and I'll just say, hey, if to get the most out of your membership, do XYZ. Don't forget about our big annual convention, but also all the regional events for SATW. And so they've created kind of again, it's kind of a mini mentor program where it's really designed just to get you through the association itself
Hmm.
versus more like a career mentor. So I've done
Right.
several of those with SATW, and those have been great.
Okay, cool. And as well, I mean, I think I'm right in saying that your associations, kind of, you have lots of partnerships with other services and brands and organizations where you can get things discounted or stuff like this. Is that correct as well? And do you have a few examples of that? And also on top of that, like that's kind of tapped into this idea of collaborating and creating these kind of ecosystems that symbiotically help feed each other. I'm wondering if you could comment on whether individually as a writer, you've kind of found partnerships with, I don't know, other companies, other writers, other brands, other organizations that have helped you as an individual, as well as the kind of the partnerships that your associations kind of foster.
Yeah, we're always trying to leverage, basically running an association. One of the great benefits of an association is that you can leverage both the collective knowledge of the association. That's where you want to tap into everyone and learn more about outlets and pitching and all that good stuff. But then also leverage the collective buying power of the association. Because I can go to a brand and I can say, hey, we've got 630 vetted outdoor media at OWA, for example. Why don't you give us a discount? Why don't you help us with this? And so I'll just pick on Loa Boots as one of our brand members. So they offer a standing discount to members all the time, where they can basically buy all the boots that they need at roughly wholesale. But then also we'll list their PR person on our website and say, oh, and if you're writing a gear review and you're on, have an outlet for a gear story, contact so and so, and she'll probably send you product directly, so you can try them out and really write a true gear review. So always trying to like leverage those opportunities, but then also trying to understand like what our members are missing. So in the U.S., of course, we have our, we have health insurance. So I know a lot of our freelance members, that's pretty expensive for them. So we went out and we found a health insurance kind of broker who could help get them health insurance at a lower rate. Things like that. We work with Hotel Engine so that when our members aren't being hosted somewhere, they can just get the best possible rate and discounted rates on booking hotel rooms, for example.
Mhm.
So always trying to look for opportunities like that with travel insurance and things like that. Because generally the brand is pretty psyched again to get in front of all those outdoor writers or travel writers. And then it benefits the members as well to save a few dollars every year.
Sure. And I mean that applies to your associations because you're offering kind of a bulk audience in some sense to those brands. I'm intrigued by this idea of the individual, the influencer, which we've seen emerge already over many years. But there was a post on LinkedIn I saw by a guy that runs the Skift channel. He's the founder, Rafa Ali. And he was talking about one of the themes, one of the trends he sees emerging and has been emerging for years is where mainstream media is kind of falling a little bit, not exactly to the wayside, but is finding itself in a bit of trouble. And individuals, the influencer, is starting to emerge as being more authentic, starting to attract more followers themselves, and basically being able to provide travel writing, travel experiences, videos, whatever it might be, in a way that really attracts an audience that traditional media cannot right now. And those influencers are building partnerships with brands themselves, just as individuals. So is that something that you've kind of been able to look into or tap into or know anybody that's doing like anything like that? I mean, because it's something that I haven't yet experienced myself personally, but it's a really interesting, I imagine if we were to both start running our blogs and 2 years down the line, we have an audience. That might be something that brands start coming to us individually to
Exactly.
start looking into.
Yeah, and frankly, it's a challenge for associations to be relevant to some of those folks because, one of our previous members, an outstanding blogger, his blog is Two Travel Dads. He's just been doing very, very well, and I encouraged him to join OWA, and he was interested. He joined, and it seemed like some of our benefits and things were still a lot of it was still focused on freelancers, and we hadn't really grasped how to best support him yet. And so 2 years later, he decided not to renew, and I had a chat with him, and I just said, "Hey, let's talk about this." And he said that, yeah, basically, there's still associations that really haven't figured out how to best work with them, how to give them what he needs. And he actually said that I think he's pulled back from almost every association he had joined because, frankly, he's been so successful that he doesn't need them anymore. I
Mm.
think associations are best situated for someone who's just getting started, maybe making a transition, or maybe midway through their career to really take their career trajectory and just crank it up a notch or three. And then you have kind of legacy members who have become so ingrained in the association that all their friends are there and they just want to stay there. But when you have an influencer like that who's very successful and he comes in, wants to be a part of that community, but then isn't just getting the benefit out of it, he naturally is just like, well, I just don't need to invest in that.
Mm.
So it's something for us associations to really focus on in the future is how do we stay relevant to that kind of storyteller and how do we provide them good benefit for their investment in us?
Yeah, that's interesting. What are the sort of things that he was lacking? Was he after kind of much more monetizable business opportunities with brands and that sort of thing? Or like what were the sorts of feedback you were getting from him?
Yeah, some of the tourism boards, and we've heard this from some of our digital publishers at SATW as well. Sometimes the tourism boards are so gung ho to pitch me as a freelancer and say, hey, we got to get you out there to our great destination, and then you're going to write about it. And sometimes when an influencer sits down, they can say, well, here's what it costs to have me come to your destination. Because, of course, an influencer is guaranteeing coverage
Mm.
versus I have to then go out and pitch and get that coverage. So a lot of those influencers are, looking to create a monetized partnership right off the bat. And sometimes some of the tourism boards weren't ready for that.
Mm.
Um, but then also, sometimes associations in the past, like, we charge a registration fee, or some associations for a pre or post tour, that might be an additional fee on top of the registration. A big influencer, they don't pay for anything.
Mm.
Um, so that's also kind of another disconnect area that we're trying to kind of work our way through to, again, to figure out how best to support that kind of storyteller.
Mm. It's fascinating though. I mean, I do see this as a trend that's only going to get bigger. So it's probably just a case of building awareness and educating the brands and the companies and those marketing managers as to this is the future kind of thing, which I guess leads me nicely on to my kind of my final question for you. You know, you've been around a bit, you talk to many different members of the travel industry. What do you see as kind of, do you see any major changes happening that's going to affect your job and the way you write articles over the next 3 to 5 years? AI is obviously a big part of the writing industry. That's kind of changing how people do research and generate content and that sort of thing. It's kind of touching on every aspect of life, not just writing, of course. But do you find yourself in a position able to kind of have a nice big step back view of the thing, or are you still in the weeds like the rest of us and just trying to get things to work?
I'm both
Mm.
all the time. Um, yeah, I mean, a big thing for me is being an outdoors person. I'm of course focused on sustainability and things like that. So sustainable tourism is a huge one. And I'm always baffled, like the over tourism issue. I call it the Mona Lisa effect because, of course, if you've been to the Louvre, you walk through like what miles and miles, acres and acres of this gorgeous artwork, and then you walk into this one room and there's like what 500 people all looking at one painting. And I loved walking away from the Mona Lisa and going to the next room and just seeing all the incredible, stunning artwork that was in there. And in that room was probably like 7 people, and I was like, why do people get so fixated on this stuff? So I bring up the so-called Mona Lisa effect because, so many people are like, I have to go to Barcelona. And then I love telling the travel story of, oh, 2 hours away is this incredible coastal city that you've never heard of, and there's no tourists there whatsoever. As an outdoors person, I think I'm more uh, better situated because I'm often telling people how to get away from things. But I think that story is just going to continue to grow, that not there but here kind of story, and avoid the crowds, or yeah, just find a better off the beaten path destination.
Yeah, no, for sure. I spoke to Matt Barker, who's the publisher of the Horizon Guides, a couple of weeks back. It's on the group as well if you want to check it out. He was saying exactly the same thing. His whole modus operandi is to seek out the unsung places of the world that don't get the
Exactly.
coverage. And I can't remember how he put it in a very nice way, which is it's not about it's about demand generation, not trying to understand what people where they want to go, but trying to educate them about where they should go that isn't the Machu Picchus and the Barcelonas and the Parises and the Notre Dames and all that sort of stuff, but places that are very close by that just don't get the attention for some reason. So I think that's you and he both agree on that front.